Our border panel is here to talk about it. Mark Morgan is a former acting commissioner at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and current visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. And Genevieve Collins is the Texas director of Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to both of you. So nice to have you both back.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So the House passed a resolution in July that strongly condemned the Biden administration and its border czar, Kamala Harris' failure to secure the United States border. Trump highlighted Kamala's bungling of the border Tuesday night during the debate.
What about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done.
Look at that face.
Yeah, all she did all night long was look down as he spoke. What are your thoughts about that, Mark? I know you have something to share with our viewers.
Yeah, look, I often say just look at past performance to predict future performance. In the past 3.5 years, the Biden-Harris administration has unleashed a level of chaos and lawlessness at our borders that we've never seen in our lifetime. In the first 3.5 years, we're inching towards 11 million total nationwide encounters from 180 different countries, including over 2 million known gotaways. At this pace, that'll make it the equivalent of the 5th largest state in our country, just under New York. There's no country on the face of the planet, including the United States, that could sustain that. We've had a higher level of criminals, including murderers, rapists, pedophiles, aggravated felons, and gang members that have been pouring across this border, including those that have killed innocent people like Laken Riley and Rachel Morin, and that list could go on. We've had drugs, including fentanyl, coming across this border that have killed more Americans than any other time in our history. And we have now a national security threat at a level that, in my opinion, makes our southern border more vulnerable now than prior to 9/11. Yeah, so in my opinion, the only choice for America's safety and national security is Donald J. Trump in the White House.
Springfield, Ohio has been all over the headlines this week. A town of 59,000. Many of our viewers live in towns that size, and has had to accommodate 20,000 Haitian migrants, 20,000 on top of their population. So a huge increase. Genevieve, let me ask you this. How many other Springfield, Ohios are there? In other words, we're focusing on this one town, but I've been looking at places in Maine, Massachusetts, upstate New York, all across this country. Can you talk about some of the other towns that are buckling under the same pressure?
Absolutely, Betsy. The reality is, welcome to Texas. We've been taking the brunt of this illegal immigration crisis for the last 4 years. I mean, we've had millions of people pour into the Texas borders where these Texas towns have been ravaged. It's not just El Paso, and it's not just Brownsville or McAllen. It's all over Texas, and now every state is a border state and having to suffer the consequences of no consequences for open borders. So there's thousands of towns across America that don't have the resources, that don't have the infrastructure or the capacity to handle this immigration crisis. And what we're seeing in Springfield is just a small microcosm of what Texas, Arizona, New Mexico have been experiencing for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, Mark, I'm surprised that the 300,000 children, missing children, unaccompanied children, that the Biden-Harris administration says they care about, but they haven't actually released a plan on how they're going to actually track them down. 323,000, somewhere thereabouts.
Some babysitter.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is that they say that they care about children, but yet 300,000 plus are missing, and we know that they're likely part of some sex trafficking ring and so many other horrendous things that could happen to children who are unprotected. So what's the action going forward? What should we be doing?
Their plan is exactly what they've been doing, right? It's a big shell game. They keep saying how the numbers are going down. That's a big lie. They just simply diverted them from entering illegally in between the ports of entry and then unlawfully bringing them through the ports of entry and still processing and releasing them in our country without properly vetting them so that they can go claim another American victim like Laken Riley or Rachel Morin. That's the truth. And if there is a President Harris, make no mistake, she's been very clear-eyed, not only in her performance for the past 3.5 years as czar, but everything that she stood for, including her position on policy and her values from day one. She's for defunding law enforcement. She's for decriminalizing illegal immigration. She fully supports sanctuary cities that releases criminals back into our country. She says on day one she's going to remove all detention facilities, and she's for widespread mass amnesty throughout this country, as well as giving free health care and education to every single illegal alien. That's been their plan for the past 3.5 years, and that will continue to be their plan on steroids if Vice President Harris becomes president.
That's true. Genevieve, you're a real expert on the impact of this migration on towns across the country. Talk with us specifically about public schools, because parents watching, they're sending their children back to school and they may be unaware of what the impact of this sudden arrival of migrant children who've never been in school, don't speak the language, they're traumatized, very needy. What's happening in the classrooms?
Chaos, Betsy. That's the best way to describe it. If you're a teacher, you are experiencing an influx of children coming into your classroom. You don't know what their reading level is. They may not speak English, most likely don't. You most likely don't have Spanish resources or other language resources in your building. So you don't know how to identify where these kids are. You don't know how to understand their trauma. And then furthermore, they're in classrooms with American students who are also trying to learn. And so there's just mass chaos because no one's talking at the same level. No one's learning at the same level. And language barriers are real barriers. Mm-hmm. And so classrooms all over America are struggling, but we're seeing that across public schools and private schools everywhere. And parents are again finding their voice and saying, I want my child to have a world-class education. And right now, my schools are being taken over by immigrants, legal immigrants. And I want to have school choice. I want to be empowered. And I want my child to have a great education, regardless of what the four walls with which they're within. So parents are finding their voice.
There's going to be real learning loss in many of these classrooms. Kids who lose a year because the teacher is going to be so focused on the needs of these migrant children.
Absolutely.
Mark, the thing is, to Betsy's point, you have the education crisis that the illegal migration causes, also the housing.
Right.
Think about Springfield, Ohio, the town of approximately 60,000 people, and then all of a sudden they have the influx of 50,000 migrants who need housing, shelter, all the basic necessities, including education. How can a small town like that handle it? Look at New York City.
Right.
Yeah.
They are actually we are actually struggling right here in New York City, expected to spend $10 billion that we don't have next year unless we actually go deeper in debt.
Yeah, so that's a good point. There's something that Genevieve talked about that she's spot on, that what Springfield represents, and I couldn't agree with her more, it represents yet another piece of information and data and fact that every town, city, and state is a border town, city, and state. And although, again, she was absolutely right that Texas, because they own about 75% of the border, they received the brunt of the chaos and lawlessness across their state. But all the threats coming in and all the issues that come across with the lawlessness doesn't stay in Texas. It makes its way throughout this entire nation. And you bring it up, New York is a great segue. I was going to mention that. Between Springfield and New York, we have two very different sized cities. But when you flood those cities with the level of illegal immigration that we have right now, 30% in Springfield, there's no town, city, or state that can handle that from a financial standpoint. Every aspect of their resources, from education to public safety to public health, the list goes on, is overwhelmed. Just like, remember, in New York, Mayor Adams says that right now this chaos and lawlessness is going to, quote, destroy New York. When
That's
are we
right.
going to wake up and enough is enough? Again, there's only one choice in November, and that's a president that actually understands that border security is synonymous with our nation's national security.
The New York Post recently reported that 75% of street crime in New York is migrant caused. 75%.
Those are deep numbers.
Right.
That's not sustainable, right, Genevieve?
It's absolutely not sustainable. Small towns don't have big budgets, and even cities like New York City, the largest city in America, is still budget busting, right? We can't afford to have our cities be under siege with crime. We can't afford to have our communities overwhelmed with fentanyl, and we don't have the infrastructure nationally to support an influx of 11 million illegal immigrants. This is just the reason why we have to secure the border. We have to close amnesty loopholes, and we have to make sure that there is an administration that is forceful in its actions, giving clear and predictable rules, and making sure that people know this country is not open. Our border is not open. If you're going to come here, you have to come here legally, because we need to know how to count you. We need to know that you're going to keep our community safe, and that there is room for you in our towns, cities, and states.
Well, Genevieve, what does AFP suggest local leaders do? For example, I've noticed that even the mayor of Denver, a Democrat, the governor of Massachusetts, a Democrat, they're saying we're not sheltering migrants anymore. We're putting a 5-day cap on shelter for migrants. It used to be they were housing them in motels and hotels for months at a time. What more do you think local leaders should do to push back on this?
I think local leaders have to use the tools that they have, which is their budgets and their voice. This is a federal issue, and the Biden-Harris administration has demonstrated that they have no interest in actually solving this issue. And so local leaders have to use their voices, but have to use their infrastructure and budgets to say, there's nowhere to go here. We cannot facilitate anyone else coming, and it's not a matter of the heart anymore. When there's 11 million illegal immigrants coming in, this is not a matter of the heart. This is a crisis, and we have nowhere to put people. And so local leaders have to say, we're going to have a zero tolerance policy for crime. We're going to support our police. We're going to support our border patrol agents if they're in those areas. And they're going to have to stand up for the people in their communities and stop bending to the will of partisan politics.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark Morgan. Thank you, Genevieve Collins. That was a great discussion. Hope you'll come back soon.
Yeah, thank you.